You're listening to The Grind. Well-caffeinated conversations with disc golfers who are passionate about improving their games and helping others to do the same. Welcome to episode 22 of The Grind, a disc golf podcast. I'm Josiah, and with me, my faithful friend, David. We're going to talk some disc golf.
How's it going, guys?
We have a fun episode lined up today. We are going to have a pro tip from Bradley Williams. We're going to talk about how do you get over that bad round or that bad tournament. Maybe it's applicable to David and I don't know. And we are going to review the Innova Pig. But first, David, as always, I've got to ask, what are you sipping on and how was your disc golf week?
Cool. We're sipping on a coffee we actually picked up on our trip in Paris. It's from KB Coffee Roasters. The coffee's from the La Senda in Guatemala. It's the Asatanaga region. I think that's pronounced correctly.
I'm just so glad this is your job.
This is actually a unique coffee. It's a carbonic maceration process, and this is a new one for me. I was telling Josiah this is in the industry. I had to pull up an article and read some stuff on it because I honestly had heard the term maybe once, never tasted a coffee that's been carbonic processed or carbonic maceration process, and I had no idea actually what it was. I had thought maybe it had a connection to the wine industry because somebody had said that at one point, and it in fact does. In 2015, there was actually a Barista World Champion that took what they were doing with the carbonic maceration process and applied it to coffee. And so it's only been around for, 7 years now?
Cool. That's interesting.
It produces a wild cup. The process it's similar to the anaerobic fermentation. You're tossing you're pitting it from the cherry, you're tossing it into a fermentation tank. It's a stainless steel fermentation tank that is completely sealed, and they pump CO2 into the tank, so it's a highly rich CO2
that's why it's
environment. Carbonic,
okay,
I guess, yeah. And there's no yeast or anything involved. And so actually the fermentation process is a lot longer than the anaerobic fermentation process.
I'm assuming because then the cultures that you have, or whatever you want to call it, have to come from the coffee itself rather than from like yeast you add.
I guess, yeah.
Interesting.
I wish I had more of a scientific background to actually understand all of this, but I have general ideas.
Now, this is better because our listeners are already like, I have no idea what they're talking about. I think it's just coffee.
This? Yeah, it's just
so it's better that you and I are like, we're pretty sure it's coffee with these fancy things going on.
But man, this is a pretty wild cup. This isn't one of those coffees that I'm like, man, I want to drink this every day. It has kind of a fruit punchy taste to it, like guava maybe going on. It's definitely really rich, fruity taste. And I've been trying to pinpoint, there's definitely something that's hitting my head on the taste buds, but I can't really hit it spot on. But definitely just that fruit punchy taste. It's a really fun experiential cup. But I have to say, like, if I had to drink this every day, I'd probably be like, I don't know if that's what I would want.
I don't know, man. I really am enjoying it. It's clean, which I think makes it, once again, clean, meaning it doesn't linger on your palate in some unpleasant way. You don't end up with like a film there. I kind of get some cherries popping. I don't know if you get it at all. I wouldn't have expected it. It's Guatemala?
Guatemala, yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily expect that from Guatemala, or at least the same type. It's almost got like the tiniest dark chocolatey lingering thing, but it's super fruity on the front end. And I don't know if any of that's correct, but that's just how I feel.
No, I think you're in the range. I think in general with these processes, it really impacts what you would expect from a region. Because before, when everything was primarily being washed, you can have a general concept of, okay, these are the tasting notes from that region. If you saw the tasting notes or heard the tasting notes, there's a good idea you can guess what region it was if you have a general background in coffee. But now with all these processes, man, this is what you would have associated with some like Ethiopian coffee or something.
Right. That's what's just so surprising.
So it just really changes your mindset of what a coffee or a cup of coffee could be. Very different for sure. It's fun.
I think it was super helpful to have that Wasatch 3-pack, the sample pack, because it just allowed you to try different processes with the same roast, same bean. I think it just showed you these are 3 wildly different coffees, and it's just the process they're messing with. And then I've been roasting coffee at home, which is I'm getting better at. I'm still not great at it. And it's wild how different the coffee can taste based on how you roast it. Even if you roast it at the same temp, like how long it stays at a certain temperature. I don't know. It seems like there's way more variables than I would have expected.
Yeah, for sure. One of these days, we're going to have to drink one of your coffees here on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I think we're ready. I just need to make it happen because I think that the last few coffees I've had are not unappealing. They may not be incredible, but they're not unappealing. I'm finally getting like the appropriate level of the density to the coffee.
Okay.
Which makes me happy because before it was pretty underdeveloped.
Go ahead. Have you found that you had to err kind of on both sides at the beginning of erring on the side of under roasting and then erring on the side of over roasting to kind of find that middle ground of what you like?
I think I erred so far on the under roasting. The temperature was right, but I think it didn't stay at temperature long enough. It just got to temperature at the very end. And so I think I've learned with my little home roasting DIY setup that I want to keep that temperature. I want to err on the side of overdoing it than underdoing it. I haven't yet gotten to the point where I feel like I've over roasted something because I think that I apologize to our listeners, but I do think that I'm learning that, you really want to care. You want to care about the temperature and the color, but you also want to care about whether those beans actually fluff up, for lack of a better term. And because when you brew it and you didn't actually get the beans to expand, you have this very, very dense coffee, and it doesn't actually pick up the coffee as you get very low extraction rates. So you get very weak coffee that tastes like grass and dirty water, which is very sad because it's good quality coffee starting out, and then you ruin it. But I think that's just part of learning.
Yeah, it's part of the process.
I've got a bag that I have my very first roast that I'm slowly sprinkling in with my other coffee because it's so bad, but I feel bad wasting it. Anyway, how was your disc golf week?
Disc golf week, for me, man, it was mostly just our practice rounds and the tournament rounds for me. I kind of took a mental break the rest of the week, and I'm still kind of nursing a little bit of an injury, so I'm just resting. We had a fun weekend. I mean, not necessarily the outcome in the tournament that I wanted. Definitely had a mental grind for me. The practice rounds were a lot of fun as well, but I mean, I didn't really have the best outcomes in the practice rounds. I feel like we were just kind of throwing a bunch of discs. And I felt like I had a really good game plan going into the tournament. Definitely just that attack mode. And then within the tournament, started out in attack mode, wasn't getting those birdies that I wanted, got into that mental funk, and then really had to battle to get out of that mental funk to recognize that at any point. I mean, one of the things that I was really coaching myself on is one of the mentalities that Paul Macbeth talked about in one of his previous rounds from his tournament of at any point you can get hot. At any point I can get hot. And just reminding myself that even though I'm on the 9th, 10th hole, birdieing 7 of the holes in a row at Delta is not outside of my skill set. I can do that. And knowing that the round isn't over. And obviously it didn't end up going in my favor. I think the first round I shot -3, and the second round I shot -1. But still ended up having a really fun time because I feel like I really had to battle through some not putting very well, hitting the bottom of the basket. A lot of mental things that I really had to struggle through and wrestle with that I feel like is going to be great to apply in later tournaments. It sucks to have to process through that in a tournament when you really want to perform on a course that you love, but we have to take those learning moments with grace with ourselves and just take them in stride as we continue to grow as players. So,
yeah, I mean, I do think you had a little bit of a perfect storm in terms of 2 weeks traveling pretty much, an injury that albeit minor that you were nursing. And I think not necessarily because of that injury, you'd be able to get as much practice in as you'd like. You combine that with like a tournament you really wanted to do well in and NADGT and wanted to qualify for nationals. Like there is a certain perfect storm in terms of when your preparation isn't quite there, but your pressure or your expectations are high. I feel like that does set you up for either, we talked about it on the second cup, which is our Patreon bonus content, but if you just had nailed your first drive and parked it, or your first few had short putts, or if you had made a long putt to start, at least this is how I feel about my round, I think it would have been totally different because you would have been performing in line with your expectations. But when you start out poorly, it's very difficult, or even just okay, when the rest of the field's doing well because it's not that windy and it's a relatively attackable course.
Yep.
it's tough to then really battle to get yourself hot. Like, yeah, Paul Macbeth said he can't do it, but there is a certain degree to which it's going against the groove that you've put yourself in to start the round. You really have to establish like a new groove for the rest of the round, and that's really difficult to do and to maintain.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I was really wrestling with was trying to find what can I use mentally to shift my mental mindset, because I came out here super pumped, got pretty negative space about 7-8 holes in, and was really having a hard time getting out of that. And I think I got out of it a little bit, but I wish that there was something that I could have latched onto. And I think that's something that as a player you can maybe continually grow into, or maybe something works during a season and at other times might be a continually changing thing for you. But definitely I feel like I'd like to find something that can really alter or change my focus. And I think I'm finding ways. And I think part of it was reflecting on what Paul Macbeth had to say: at any point you can get hot.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely a learning experience for me, for sure. How about you, man?
Yeah, I mean, a very similar experience. I played a little better than you second round. Finished had a streak where I had some good holes where I thought, I was 6 strokes back to start the round. But I really thought when I was getting hot, I think I birdied 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 at one point, that I had a chance to chase down the leaders, and then just missed a bunch of circle one putts after like decent drives, but not like pinpoint drives. And that was the difference between, fourth and first. I feel good about my performance besides the putter, and I feel good that I was able to like I lost my putt to start. I didn't have my putt to start, and I found it, and then lost it and found it. And even though that was like super annoying, I do think it's a good experience, like you were saying. For me, I think the big thing I want to do is just be more intentional about my pre-shot routine. Like we were talking about this earlier, but clear my mind and then pick my target, focus on that target, and keep myself slow and calm and relaxed. Just forcing that my body and my mind to go to some neutral state to try to let go of everything. That's not going to always work every single time, but I think that the more I can practice that discipline of, it doesn't really matter whether I'm in a groove or out of a groove, or I just triple bogeyed or I just aced. That hasn't happened to me in a tournament, but I just imagine. Then I still need to just buckle in and focus and really treat each shot. Like you were saying earlier today when we were talking, hey, we made a story of our round. No, don't make a story of your round until the end, and afterwards you can tell the story on a podcast if you like. But to really just focus on that specific shot, and not even what I need to do, but focus on those things that I need to set my body up to do what it knows how to do because I practice. So, and we're going to get into this a little bit more later. We can probably jump straight into a pro tip if you're good with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, we got the how'd you do that pro tip. And this one's from Bradley Williams. Probably top 5 smoothest throwers of all time, I'd say. And I asked him, hey, Bradley, what's one thing you wish you knew when you were first building your game? And he said that putting is and was the only thing that matters. And that is so funny and fun because we just had Aaron Gossage on the podcast last week. Shout out to Aaron. And he was saying, hey, look, tee to green is really what matters. If you can drive well, then at the top level, if you can drive well, it'll make up for bad putting. And now you have Bradley Williams saying, you just got to make your putts. And I think this is this tension where, we're talking about it earlier, but your drives really do affect your putts. And in some ways, your putting affects your driving in terms of, hey, I got to put it close because I can't make a putt. Or, hey, I'm free to throw it wherever I want, because I'm making everything from 50 feet and in. But I thought I'd pull this one out of the archive of pro tips we had because I thought it was just applicable to what we were dealing with, which is just a poor performance putting. And just showing that, yeah, driving sets us up because we had a bunch of 25 to 30 footers we had to make in order to be successful, and we didn't make a lot of them. But what do you think?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I love that. I think Aaron kind of hammered home that if you want to be at the top, distance is obviously extremely important driving. But I think in general across as we continue to grow as amateurs, as much as we want distance, this is something very practical that anyone, as whether you're a beginner, intermediate player, advanced player, pro player, it's just applicable. Everybody can work on their putting. You can work on it in your backyard. It's so easy to have a space and create the time to do this. And it's just a matter.
Even if you don't have a basket, you can putt at a tree or something. I used to do that all the time.
Absolutely. And I think as amateurs, I think Josiah and I are kind of in a season that we really want to start working on getting some more distance with our drives. But as amateurs, where we're at in general, I know if my putting is on, I know that I'm going to be in the top 5 in a tournament in advance if my putting is on. Even if my drives are back and forth, I know if my putt is on, I'm going to be in the top 4 or 5. And so I think it's just the most applicable knowing for scoring as an amateur and what you're competing with your field. That's what it comes down to. It comes down to the putting. And I think once you find a groove putting and you don't have to think as much about your putting, the rest of your game becomes more simple.
It puts so much, takes so much pressure off your game. I feel like when you're putting well, I totally agree. I like that. One thing I was thinking about was just my 2 tournament wins this year. Both my drives felt off, but my upshots were solid and my putting was great. Mm-hmm. And my other tournament's performance, particularly this last one, my drives felt a little better. Not super consistent, but much better. I had some really nice drives, but my putting was just a little off. Or a lot off maybe. And it is this thing where all of a sudden it's very, very hard to perform well, score wise. And I do think there's some courses that are going to emphasize drives more than putts, upshots more than drives. Like Palisade, upshots really matter to, when we play tournaments there, because it's a long course and there's a lot of holes you're just not going to get to the green on. Delta, you'd only have upshots really if you shanked your drive, because it's almost all of the holes are under 350. Mm-hmm. So for us, we should reach the green most shots if we don't, shank it, hit a tree or something. So I do think it's interesting. I think one of the things that's hard for me is just balancing how you build that putt and then how you maintain it. And I think one of the things that I've found myself doing is when I putt so much, I actually get in my head about putting because I practice the wrong way. And we've talked about this before, where you really want to practice the way you're going to play and practice confidently. And I think, hearing Aaron talk about putting for 2 hours, it's like, 1, that's cool commitment and that shows like what the pros do. But 2, I think I'd be so in my head by the end of it because I'd miss some 12 footers after making 30 footers. And what am I doing? I'm trying to fix the technique and stuff. And so I do think I want to get better about having a really intentional practice routine that would lead towards confidence, not putting just to putt, but putting with really intentionality. And I think Aaron talked about last week during the second cup, but he said he did 2 things. He did muscle memory, so lots of putts at the same time quickly to try to get that muscle memory down. And then he did some where he practiced his actual pre-shot routine and stuff, which I love. I think that may be what I try to do, is try to balance those 2 things depending on what my practice putting looks like.
Yeah. What was interesting for me, we talked about that my putting was, I think I left about 10 to 12 putts within 30 feet on the field during the Delta tournament. But before and in between rounds, I was practicing my putting. Before the tournament, my putts felt great. In between the tournament, or in between rounds, my putting felt great. It was just something mental switch within the round. I was not committing on my putts.
Yeah, it's not mechanical, it's mental.
Yeah, it's mental. And so I think that you have to incorporate some sort of mental aspects within your practice routine with your putting that you can take into the round, at least to help you adjust when you are making those mistakes.
I thought about if we had played horse or putting league that the week before the tournament, if we would have performed better. My guess is yes, because I think it would have added that just little element of not heavy pressure, but just that little bit of element of pressure to just simulate that tournament side of things.
For sure. I think feeling that pressure to perform and seeing yourself push through it definitely gives you, again, going back to that mental, a lot of putting comes down to your mental space and how you feel, of whether it's your rhythm or whether your confidence, whatever it might be. Everything is intertwined with your putting. So
Yeah. One thing I was interested by is I asked Bradley as a follow-up, how does someone just starting out or struggling on the putting green build that putting game? And what he said, which I thought was super interesting, was video record your putts and directly compare your technique to touring pros. And I thought that was interesting because that does get into the mechanical side. I want to talk to you about your experience doing this. We both did it this today, actually. I do think that there's certain things that I'm seeing with once I've done that mechanically, if you have a simple putt, maybe it even helps you have more room for error on the mental side, if that makes sense. But what do you think after recording your putts?
I actually felt pretty good of seeing my mechanics and seeing my release point. And I think there's something with maybe filming that you're focused on. I definitely was more focused on, okay, make sure you're snapping at the basket, David. But and so it definitely puts everything into your mind of the points where you need to get to. But I definitely was realizing that there are moments in my putt that I'm focused on getting to as far as points go that gives me that
like distances from the putter or like distances from the basket or like
movements with my body.
Okay, yeah.
And I think getting to those points is what creates my rhythm and what's triggering that muscle memory. And I mean, you mentioned talking about a player that maybe you feel like you've emulated or what it might look after. And I think I mentioned, I think early on in putting, I was really trying to figure out how, because I was just really going with this lofty push putt. And I didn't really have much on it. I was just trying to get it to the basket, and I didn't want to get it very far from the basket if I missed.
Really lofty.
Really lofty. And
25 feet away from the basket, it'd be like 15 feet in the air.
While at the same time, I was really jealous of Josiah's more of a spin putt, that he's putting a lot of speed in. Josiah can putt much longer distances than I can. And I was definitely jealous of what he can do with his putter, but I wasn't necessarily jealous when he missed the basket because he definitely had a much further putt to make than I did. However, I felt like I didn't feel confident in my putt. I felt like I was just trying to get to the basket. That was my goal. I was getting to the basket, not necessarily in the basket. And I started watching a lot of videos, and I don't think I realized how much I emulated my putt after Paul Macbeth, but I really like that slight hyzer putt that he creates. And he definitely has kind of this combination between a push and a spin putt. He has a little bit of speed coming off of it with the spin, but he's still kind of getting a push putt going. And I definitely have incorporated a little bit more spin in order to get to the basket quicker. And I think I'm hitting the basket more often. And every once in a while I have a comebacker that's a little bit more tough, but it's still not terrible. I'm not doing a massive spin putt like Josiah's doing, but
I think mine has actually become much less fast and much the comebackers are much shorter than they used to be.
For sure. I'd agree.
And I think besides this past tournament, I think I'm converting at just as high of a rate.
That's awesome.
I see, it's funny because I imagine myself emulating my putt after Macbeth. And you know, when you used to putt, it was like a pitch putt. It wasn't even push putt. It was like, it was just like horseshoes or something.
Let's get it to the basket.
Yeah. Or just, within 10 feet. Who cares? 10 feet short is fine. Like I can make the 10 footer.
Yeah.
And I think I had a very direct nose up spin putt. And then I incorporated some kind of push putting elements over time. And now I'm finding myself, I was watching it and I was kind of surprised because I thought I would like watch it and then like watch a Macbeth or somebody who's got that spush putt and we'd have a similar putt. But I realized I'm more spin putt again. I'm just not quite as nose up and not quite as hard. And I think I have a little bit of Lazat in the follow through. But what I noticed was that I have a lot of complexities in my putt, a lot of added motions with the nose angle of the disc. I kind of have the Heimberg, like bring it up totally vertically, kind of block the basket. But then I bring it all the way back to the opposite vertical, this big pendulum in front of my chest to gain space, I think, to then push it off. But the nose angle changes so much from my backswing through the actual full putt that I think that's one of the reasons that I think I've got a fairly consistent nose angle. But I do think sometimes I get these like very nose down putts or very nose up putts. And I think that that's part of it that I hadn't filmed myself putting in a long time. And I realized, I think there's just too much going on here, especially from the side. It was really helpful for me to view. I thought that was really helpful. So I think I may try to just simplify my backswing a lot. And then the other thing I noticed in the tournament, as well as just as I'm practicing and did this video, is when I'm committed to the putt, I release sooner than later. And I think when I'm not, I hold on to the disc. And you mentioned that you hold on the disc longer than Macbeth. And I thought it'd be a good point because I've watched enough slow-mo pro putts that I've realized they don't have the disc in their hand in the forward motion very long at all. It's a very quick pop, whether it's a spin putt or a push putt. It's a very quick pop out of the hand. I think that's one of the things I want to work on is simplifying the nose angles so I can have a very short putt. And then, because I think it gives you a ton of power. You think you need it in your hand longer to generate that power, but I think that quick acceleration popping from whatever your reach back is or your backswing is, whatever you call it.
Honestly, that was one of the things that I can't remember at what point you mentioned.
I think it was at Puttingling one night.
You had mentioned releasing earlier that you can get a little bit more speed on it. And I definitely have incorporated that some. I wouldn't say exaggerating it, but I definitely have incorporated a little bit more of knowing that I can release it earlier. And in general, I feel like I am feeling better about my putt since I at least have that in my head that I don't have to release all the way out. I'm obviously following through to the basket, and that's where my hand's going to, but you're getting it down here and getting that snap. And I think that's something I still can really mess around with to try to get some more speed. So, because I mean, really, once I'm getting outside of the circle one, that 33 to 35 range, it's really difficult for me to just have a putt to the basket. I'm definitely having to go to the step putt, which I do like, but it takes a lot more to get to the basket. And I'd love to have much more of a range in order as far as putting goes, especially my step putt maybe from the 33 to the 50 range feels pretty good. But outside of that, I'm really having to work to get the disc to the basket. And I'd really like it to be a little bit more simple for me to get to.
Yeah, even with my spin putt, I feel like 50 feet, I really have to focus on getting a ton of spin and snap on it. And it's unreliable because you have to do all that. I think it feels a little bit strange at first to work on that quick pop. But I think if you watch, one of our listeners and patrons, Zach, has put together a compilation on YouTube from a bunch of Central Coast footage, with Ian's permission, by the way, of pro putts, like a lot of their slow-mo highlights. And it's very interesting because you can watch 20 different pros putt, and they all have this pop. And then once you see it and you try it, it feels insecure, it feels strange, but I think it's actually more consistent as well because you're shortening your motion, the actual motion that counts when your hand's on the disc. And then the rest of it is follow through. And I think while it feels strange, I think it's higher level consistency because you have less time holding the disc and less time for your arm to open up or close or whatever that thing is. And I think you just get a ton more acceleration with a smoother motion. So I'm going to try to incorporate just from my own putting video, just a little bit more a direct backswing into my more spinny putt, and then a quicker pop, and not necessarily faster but shorter duration. And I think while it's going to mess with me a little bit, I think it's going to provide some consistency, and I'm going to have to try less hard to get the disc to the basket, which I think sometimes when I'm not putting well, I feel like I've got to use a ton of arm and body and everything to just get the disc to go 30 feet or 40 feet.
Yeah. I could be completely off base here, but could you correlate it mechanically to when you're, as far as a lot of the big pros, when they're driving with getting a lot of spin on their disc, they have that slight wrist curl that they're rotating out of it in order to get the spin on it. Would you correlate kind of what they're doing there as on the putting green with having that quick snap release from down low?
Yeah, that's interesting.
I feel like mentally I started correlating that in my head as far as getting that spin on the disc.
Well, I'd say I don't know specifically with the wrist curl. I'd have to think about that one. And it seems like wrist curl is something that some of the top throwers do naturally, but I'm just not the best technical guy. But I'd say in general, the idea that you would have a smooth acceleration rather than speed like across all of your throws and your putts, I think is totally correlates. And I think that wrist curl could be something with that. I think there's a danger in putting with a big wrist curl because you have this, you're hinging your hand, and that hinging of the hand, if you have a lot of it, is going to lead, I think, to left to right misses. And so I think I have a little bit of wrist curl, but I think that the wrist curl should be something that you would add to your putt as you need power and distance. But in general, those short putts, I'd say not having a tight wrist, but I think no matter what your putting style is, that huge wrist hinge, I think, will sometimes challenge you. So I think you almost want your fingers popping to be the primary thing where you would say, like, that's how you get your power is. Yeah. You engage your full body, and then I think that little bit of pop where you intentionally release the disc, and that actually is one of the things you can get from that early or that short putting motion or short period of time the disc is actually in your hand during the forward putt. And probably going back to what you were saying, there is something to the idea, like a drive is a backhand drive is a passive release, right? The disc rips out of your hand at full power. But I do think like the forehand where you are intentionally snapping a little bit more, I think, or maybe, I don't know. I'm not a technique guy. I think I could get there, but it just messes with my game so much. I'm afraid of getting too into technique, which is what we were talking about backhand distance earlier. I think it's something I want to get over is like, okay, I'm going to kind of mess with my game a little bit. Whether it's right now, I'm going to mess with putting because honestly, Bradley Williams told me to, so I'm going to try. But I want to mess with it on backhand as well. And I'd be interested when we talk to the overthrow guys what they think about wrist curl, because like your brother John said, hey, I curl my wrist and that really helps me get pop on the disc. And we've certainly heard other people talk doing that, but I don't know if the curling the wrist actually does it, or the fact that you are curling your wrist causes your body to do the right things otherwise. That's the hard thing about any sort of form or technique thing. And I think for putting, I think that short motion is not just a short motion. It's also that it forces that active pop of your hands rather than you running out of stroke from that forward release and just opening your hand. I think it's this more intentional thing. I don't know.
Well, I think it goes back to, I can't remember who it was at what point. We talked about over-exaggerating what you think you need to do. And I think the over-exaggeration helps you at least make an adjustment because you think you make an adjustment, but in reality, maybe you moved a centimeter and it's really not making an impact. You feel like you're leaning back completely, but really you're standing up straight.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I think that's like true in life as well. I often think that it's helpful for me when I have a tendency to be pushed past my tendency, even beyond what would be right or good or helpful, in order to kind of like get balance. So whether that is like, hey, I'm naturally introverted, well, I might need to be pushed to an extrovert extreme just so I learn to like talk to people a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
It feels like an extreme, but yeah, I don't know.
Yep.
So this is going to kind of follow along with our tournament, but David, this is your worst performance to date at the tournament. Is that accurate?
I would say Frisco is pretty bad, but I would say the worst as far as genuinely believing that I was going to get out there and crush it.
Then not.
And just completely falling on my face.
Yeah. And this tournament was fine. I didn't perform well, but I didn't perform poorly. But last year I had like all my tournaments besides maybe like one that were just really poor performances. And so I thought we could talk a little bit about how do you just move past that bad round of that bad performance? How do you learn what you need to learn, but not hold on to the negativity of that it would affect both your performance later and your enjoyment of later rounds or later tournaments? So what do you think, man?
I think this is more so for us right now, but it's going to be great to apply for everybody else as well.
Part of the podcast is I get to pick the topics and then I get to send them to David. And so I pick ones that are relevant to me.
David, here's what you need to work on. Dude, this is something huge. We talk about mental game. We talk about just the psychology of sports. This is huge. I talked about earlier just that mentality that Macbeth had with having the going even through the first 9 and then the back 9 crushing it and going 9 down. At any point in the round, you can get hot. Depending on the course, obviously, it might look differently of what you can do on the course. But having the mentality that the round isn't over and finding ways or things or people, whatever it might be, to help you find positive mental space. And one thing that I found is that even if you do get that positive mental space, because the second round of the tournament, I ended up shooting worse. I shot -1. And I was in pretty positive space that second round. I had a great card. I really enjoyed. There was one guy on my card that I played with a couple of times before, and he had an incredibly hot round. I think he shot -9, which is 1 away from the hot round. I think the hot round was 10. But I was super pumped watching him because I really like him as a person, and it was fun just to see him get hot. And so you would think that would translate over into me playing well, at least in theory for me, because that's something that I get really excited about. But it definitely, it didn't change the outcome of my score the second round. And I think being okay for me, realizing being okay with if you don't have the good round, it's really not that big of a deal. Every single day is not going to be your day. You're not going to go up there and crush 1,000 rated round every day. For us, we're not going to go up there and crush what my peak round has been 978 or something like that.
Yep.
I'm not a 978 player. I'd like to be a 978 player, but my consistency is not there yet. And being okay with realizing this is something that I could learn from right now and seeing your rounds as a learning experience, I feel like has been huge for me as a player, as far as realizing that, we've talked before, we're not pros. even the pros, you go out there and you have to recognize that I'm not an 1100 rated player.
Yeah.
I can shoot a 1080 round, but that doesn't mean I'm going to shoot a 1080 round every time. And I'm obviously not talking about myself there, but being able to recognize that, disc golf is a game of mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, and you have to make adjustments and learn what not to do, and just kind of have fun with the ride. If you just beat yourself up over the mistakes constantly, it's not going to be a fun game.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's this balance to me between having confidence in your game and that also being a realist about your game. And I feel like a lot of people are going to tend towards being overly optimistic, overly pessimistic about themselves or about their game. And I think that there's this right balance where having the confidence of for you, a 978 rated player of hey, I know I can shoot 980 rounds and there's no reason that can't be today. And the good rounds show the good rounds. Of course, you can have some good tree kicks and some lucky bounces or whatever. But in general, I think the good rounds show the kind of player you are when your game is focused and your mind is focused and things are clicking. And there's no reason why in any given round that can't be you or that shouldn't be you. And at the same time, giving yourself grace for when, hey, I just missed another 25-foot putt 6 feet wide right of the basket and gave myself a tough par putt when everybody else is birdieing, or I messed up the star par because I bogeyed or whatever that thing is. I feel like there is this there's this balancing act between having maybe even an inappropriately positive view of your own game in order to get yourself into the right state during a round that you can perform well and aren't just worried about when am I going to screw this up? It's no, I'm in the groove. I'm going to keep being in the groove. But also, like Eric Oakley was saying a few episodes back, understand that growth and progress isn't linear. There's always going to be ups and downs. That's just part of it. And it's part of what makes disc golf fun in some ways.
Yeah. I love what you said there and hammered on, because I feel like in my head, it's in a way we're reaching a different level of maturity in the game of our confidence. As far as you think of adolescence, when you're a kid and confidence to you is feeling really good about yourself and believing that you are freaking great, that you are just a fantastic, awesome person. Everybody wants to be your friend.
Well,
and then
because you know that if you let that image slip at all, you're going to be
Yep.
I am the loserest of losers. Everybody thinks I'm a dork.
Yeah. And then as we grow into adulthood, you realize that that's really not attainable. something that's more attainable is like, yeah, I'm a good person. I genuinely want to do good by people, and people should enjoy being around me. But the reality is I'm going to make mistakes, and I have to be graceful with myself. And that's kind of a level of confidence of, this isn't what identifies me. What identifies me is that I genuinely want to do good by people. I am going to make mistakes. And I think there's a level that's going to the level of confidence that you're talking about, is that maturity of realizing that this is what I'm capable of. I'm going to make mistakes, and there's going to be days that I'm really hot and enjoy that ride. And there's going to be days that it seems like there's a lot more mistakes out there on the field than there are successes. And that's just part of the growing process. And that's part of enjoying the game. I think laughing at yourself is like Simon Lizotte was watching a video on like worst shots or funny responses by some of the worst shots in disc golf. And Lizotte obviously had half of the responses, but I think he threw a roller like straight into the bushes one time, and immediately was just like, well, that was successfully the worst shot you've ever thrown. And just being able to like joke around about it and laugh about it just makes it for recognizing the fact that this is a fun game and it's a game of mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah. That's good. I really appreciate that, like, parallel to life, and how you learn that confidence isn't just expecting the best out of yourself all the time. It's also understanding that there's a broader picture. And I think I was pretty impressed by how well you handled how poorly your tournament went from your standards, because you had put a lot of excitement and thought and energy into it. If there's any tournament you want to do well at this year, it would have been this one.
Yeah, for sure.
And to like have played below your normal standard and still be able to like laugh and joke and be okay about it, I thought showed a lot of like, okay, this is good, because I wasn't sure if David was going to be like a little bit heartbroken about it. And maybe you are a little bit heartbroken, but I think you balanced it by like, I had fun. I had a great weekend.
Well, I'm glad it came off that way, because there was for sure the inner turmoil of being really disappointed in myself. But my goal is to not let that impact the people around me, because obviously it's impacting me inside and bumming me out.
So you're just going to hold it deep inside.
If I'm letting that impact my friends in between a tournament, like what? That's not being a good friend.
But there is a balance there between not impacting someone negatively and also being like real.
Dude, guys, this sucks. Yeah. I think for me, it's waiting till after the round to be able to process that, and knowing that I'm experiencing those emotions. I think knowing, like, I can tell from you as a friend asking me the questions on the way home, and I mean mid-round, whatever it might be, of how you're doing and whatnot. I know you're aware of what I'm feeling, because I know that I have some very deep emotions. And so I think having a friend that I know has a general idea, and same thing with my brother. He had a very good idea that I was pretty disappointed in myself. And that wasn't necessarily the time to have those conversations. I think this is the perfect time to have those conversations.
With, a few hundred other people.
Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of part of it. I mean, that's part of the mental game with friends, and trying to, because we're all trying to find that positive space or whatever it might be. And part of it is cheering friends on along the way.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, the only other thing I'd add to that is just, I like to try to find some positive about the round or about the tournament. For this tournament, I can say like, hey, last year at this time, I did not feel confident about backhand Anheuser lines. I wanted to throw something really flippy on a hyzer flipper forehand, because I just didn't trust that Anheuser to hold turn, high elevation, low arm speed, whatever it is. And I had like both on hole 1 and on hole 17, I threw Annies like very confidently and ended up in circle 1 all 4 of those, playing both holes twice, both rounds. I didn't make all my putts, but I just felt really good about the fact that it's just a skill that I feel confident in. It's not just that I can do occasionally, but I feel confident in. And it opened up some lines that I would have been really forcing with a hyzer flip or a forehand. Maybe not the forehand, but with my distance, probably the forehand. So little things like that of just saying like, hey, there's something good I did, or something good about the round that I can hold on to. And then letting go the rest as a learning experience. And then like after this podcast, not really complaining too much about our Delta performance, but just moving on and improving our games and having fun.
Yeah. I think there's absolutely something to say, being able to find the positives. Not only the positives of things that you did well or things that you're excited about in your growth, but also looking at the positives as far as what you learned, what we were talking about. of recognizing what mistakes not to make in a tournament. And I think for me, this tournament walking away was, I think part of it was allowing myself to get into a lazy mental state putting. And I think a little bit on the tee pad as well because of the heat. It was definitely harder for me to focus. And I would love to try to, if anybody has any recommendations of ways to focus better when it's 100 degrees outside, I mean, drinking tons of water and eating calories throughout the tournament is obviously helpful. I definitely had a hard time finding a way to not let my mind be lazy. And I think that was a big part of being so short on my putts and hitting the bottom of the basket is I wasn't focused on finishing at the basket. I kept going to the point of I'm just exhausted. I'm exhausted. Yeah.
Well, my general thinking is it's a lot about how you prep your mind for it as well. Like,
yep.
I'm going to really struggle because it's hot and it's going to be miserable. Our tournament director literally said, hey, second round, you're all going to die. It's going to be so hot. And it was. When we were driving back home, one of the banks said like 103 or 104.
So can I blame him for that second round?
Yeah, I think so. I think we should actually ask for half your money back.
I like finding people to blame, so.
Yeah, that works. We should get into a disc review.
Let's do it.
Time for the What Was That disc review. This time we've got the Innova Pig, which is a 4-speed, 1 glide, 0 turn and 3 fade approach disc, mid-range putter. I don't know. It's kind of in that weird tweener range. What'd you think of the Pig, David?
Dude, I liked it. It definitely it reminds me a bit of the Zone. I'd say it's a little bit more dumpy than the Zone. I really like the hand feel is almost identical to me as the Zone.
Okay.
I mean, it has kind of this little notch on top, but it's not necessarily quite in the way of how it might impact my finger grip on the disc. So it still has kind of the Zone feel for it.
Do you think it's a little bit deeper than the Zone, or you think it's pretty similar?
For me, the hand feel feels pretty dang similar.
Okay.
The plastic is you said it's a Glow.
Yeah, this is the Bradley Williams Glow Pig, which is a Glow Pro plastic or a Pro Glow. I don't know.
I love the tackiness.
Yeah, it's a really
the tackiness and stiffness of this plastic. I don't think I've ever thrown it before. Really loved it. It's definitely a disc that I enjoy throwing it. It's very predictable. It definitely I was throwing it in the wind today. I was throwing it back and forth with my wife. And I can get it up I was throwing a lot forehand, some backhand. I was putting it on a slight anhyzer in a headwind, and it just held straight for a while, and then dumped out. It reminded me a lot of what the Zone would do, but again, it felt maybe even a little bit more predictable, but you're not going to get as much distance, I guess, with it.
Were you throwing in the field?
Yeah, we were throwing in the field.
One thing I noticed, and the field probably won't tell you too much, is I think it had a little less skip than a Zone.
Really? Okay.
I don't know if it's just the shape of it or the fact that I don't know. I think that maybe it's a little bit of a more blunt nose than the Zone to me.
I could see that visually.
And then it's got, I don't know if you call it a thumb track, but it's got a dip back into the flight plate.
Yep.
I think it feels good, both backhand and forehand. I don't love the Zone backhand. I think this feels a hair better. And then I'd say the Zone to me feels a hair better on the forehand. But yeah, I agree. I don't think it has quite as much, not that the Zone has glide, but this, whether it's the overstability or the lack of glide, it seems like it wants, almost like the Berg, it wants to go to a certain distance, and then it's just kind of done. The difference between the Berg and the Pig is the Berg just drops out of the sky pretty much straight down with the slightest bit of fade, and the Pig, it just it's like, okay, I went as far as I'm going to go, and then it just dumps hard right or left, whatever the fade is, depending backhand, forehand, left-hand, right-handed. I could see someone who had some power really, really getting a lot out of this disc as the approach range, because I do think it puts on the brakes really nicely, and that could be super helpful. I think the Zone, sometimes you can accidentally hit it a little too hard, and that speed, if you keep it going straight, it will carry pretty far. And then the fade is, I think, a little bit more of a natural kind of goes from straight to fade a little bit more naturally. And so I think you can sometimes get a longer flight to the right if it's a forehand backhand or forehand right-handed in terms of just the distance it travels.
I have to say that my wife was very proud because she guessed more correct on the numbers than I did. We both thought it was generally very close to the zone. I guessed that it was more stable, and as far as the flight numbers go, and she guessed that it was less glide. And obviously by the flight numbers, she was more correct.
Well, the flight numbers are obviously perfectly accurate.
It's always perfectly accurate.
Is the zone 4303?
I think it's 4303. Yep.
Yeah, I think this goes to me like 25 feet less far than a comparable zone.
I get that.
And dumps harder. I think if the Berg, when you have this little bit of thumb track going on, I think if the Berg and the zone had a baby, it'd be the Pig.
The Pig, I get that.
And I could see if you didn't bag a Berg or you didn't bag a zone, finding this as like a nice, like you could use this for everything you use a Berg for. It wouldn't finish this straight. And you could use this everything you use for a zone for except the furthest shots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, like, I don't think you'd lose anything from it.
I do feel like it's more 2/3 of the way towards the zone. So it would have 2/3 of the genes of the zone and 1/3 of the genes of the Berg.
How that exactly works. I'm not really into the biology thing, but I'm pretty sure that's a strange ratio, but sure.
Yeah, I get that.
It's, it's discs, not people. We don't really know how that all works.
We're just having fun.
I think this would be a great disc for, like I said, the power player, or I think for anybody who's filling out the bag and wants that overstable distance control upshot disc. I think especially forehand, but I think backhand as well. I'd love to see how they beat in, because it'd be interesting to see if it got a hair more glide and a hair less dumpiness, and then you could layer them. I remember Ricky, before he switched manufacturers, was bagging like 7 pigs.
Jeez.
And I don't know if he just had a lot of extra room in his bag, but it was ridiculous number of them, and I think he just layered them and worked them through, and they end up being like his approach disc for everything, like his main throwing putter. Ours was new, pretty new, but I liked it a lot. I think I would definitely recommend it to someone who's checking out those overstable approach discs, and I think I liked it way more than the Gator 3 and the AVR X3 that we've tried before in terms of being that approach disc. They were very, all three of those are very different. I think the Gator 3 is faster and even more overstable and dumpy, and I think the AVR X3 is a little bit straighter and a little bit glidier. But I think to me I enjoyed it much more than those two.
For sure. I'm curious, have you thrown this at all before?
No, I'd never thrown the Pig before.
Okay, for sure.
What were you curious about?
That's what I was curious about. I was curious if you had ever thrown it before.
I've tried a lot of Frisbees, but not this one. It was brand new to me. And I enjoyed it for sure. I liked it, especially on that little bit of Annie flick like you were talking about. It held straight for a really long time and then just dumped out hard.
It definitely has more of a solid dump than the zone does.
And I think that's one of the reasons it doesn't skip, is I think it just gets to like a kinda harder...
Like the flat top Firebird, how it just dumps and spikes into the ground.
Yeah, when you're spiking the flat top Firebird, it just doesn't go anywhere. That's how the Pigs seem to go for me. Okay. And probably this plastic being like that
more tacky
bit. Well, we should probably get into a rating. Our rating system is, David and I will each score the Pig, or whatever disc we're reviewing, 1 to 5. Some are scores to 10. 1 is it's just not that great of a disc. 2 is it's an okay disc, but there's better options out there. 3 is it's a good disc, but it doesn't stand out. 4 is it's a fantastic disc. 4 is it's a fantastic disc, but it's not going in my bag. And 5 is it's going in the bag. So, David, what's your rating?
I think I'm going to go with a 4. I think if I would have been introduced to the Pig before the zone, I possibly could have been as in love with the Pig as I am with the zone, because I think part of it is just your familiarity with the disc. And I think at this point, I have this relationship with the zone that would be very hard to walk away from.
Yep.
But man, I loved it. The predictability of it, the hand feel. I love the plastic. It's very tacky and very stiff, which when I'm looking for my zones, that's really what I'm trying to gear towards as far as approach discs go. I loved it. Definitely would recommend it, and I could see myself if the zone didn't exist, or if I was unable to ever get one again. I think I could throw a Pig and not be wildly disappointed with not having my zones.
Yeah, I totally buy that as well. I will give it a 4 as well, and I think for similar reasons. I think I like the versatility of having both the Berg and the zone in my bag, because I think it opens up the shots for sure. But I think if I could easily handle the Pig taking both slots and be just fine. But I love the Berg, and I think that the Zone is a very helpful slot as well. So not going in my bag, but it could go in yours. If you want to win this Pig, you can just head over to our Instagram page. We're going to have a giveaway on this week's episode post. Big thanks to 1010 Disc for sponsoring this disc review. They've got great selection, great prices, great pictures of their discs, and free shipping over $60. And you can get it even cheaper by using the coupon code TheGrind5 to get 5% off your order. So that's 8 out of 10. Great score, great disc. And David, that's the majority of our episode, but I thought just for fun, disc golf's supposed to be fun. We're going to keep building our perfect disc golfer. And I thought it'd be fun to do two things. So distance forehand, and then mental game strategy. So not clutch factor or anything like that, but just strategy of how you plan the holes and how you play the holes as they unfold. So first, distance forehand, who you got?
Can we go distance forehand eagle before his injury? Does that work?
Well, you can assume he'll recover.
Assuming he'll recover, eagle's forehand, because we talked about Aaron's forehand on the last podcast, pretty incredible. But I feel like the predictability and distance that eagle has is unmatched when he is healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to go Aaron because I don't know whether eagle, even if he has a full recovery, will ever lean on the forehand like he did before, just because I think it is...
Did you set me up there?
You set yourself up. I was just allowing you to imagine a world in which Eagles
feel like
totally
you're discrediting my pick.
I would pick Eagle as well.
Okay, now I feel better.
If I knew he was going to be healthy and fully healthy, but I need to change it up.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
And watching Aaron play Memorial, I was shocked at how far he was throwing forehands.
It was insane.
Like 50 to 100 feet further than Macbeth and Anthony Barella.
Yeah.
And on a little different lines, and I think also he was just on the podcast, so gotta include Aaron.
Oh, it's pretty insane. I love giving you a hard time.
No, I like it too. How about strategy?
Oh man, strategy. I feel like have both of us used Macbeth? Because I feel like
you can use Macbeth again.
I feel like in general, his mental strategy, for the most part, I feel like there's definitely times to where I think he's talked about not really enjoying playing disc golf at times. I think that's really when he gets into his funks. But his mental strategy when he wants to win, I think he's very, very tough to beat when he wants to win and he's enjoying playing disc golf. So I think I'm going to go with Macbeth.
Yeah, I like Macbeth as well for that. I'm going to pick Sexton. I just think from someone who the game plan and the execution, while I would probably rather emulate Macbeth because I think he plays sometimes a little bit more aggressively and more fun. I think that sort of methodical game plan, once we gave this perfect disc golfer all these other crazy skills, I think would be pretty ideal because I do think Sexton is one of the best thinkers of the game in terms of strategy and game plan. But honestly, we're kind of splitting hairs here. You could go with a lot of different players. But I do think there are some players that if you just gave them the right caddy, they may score 2 or 3 strokes better every round. And I don't think Sexton or Macbeth are one of those. I don't think they need it. Well, that's the episode this week. Thank you guys for listening. Be sure to hit us up on Instagram to win this beautiful Tour Series Pig. Thank you to Bradley Williams for the pro tip. And we will catch you guys next week. But until then, whether it's coffee or disc golf, don't forget to enjoy the grind.